This is Crowmar with TGN, welcoming you to another World of Warcraft Cataclysm beta video. This is part 19 of the 22-part series DPS Rundown, and today we're covering the Arcane Mage. So, let's take a look at the design of this class now. The biggest change to Arcane comes then the changes to Arcane Blast. The buff from Arcane Blast no longer affects your other spells. It only affects Arcane Blast. And you still get rid of the buff by casting Arcane Missiles or Arcane Barrage. Or anything else, really. But you definitely want to do that because you don't want to let this stack up to 4 times because it gets way too expensive. You want to do about 3 stacks and then hit a missiles, and 3 stacks, hit a missiles, and so on. And if you don't get lucky enough to proc Arcane Missiles by the 3rd one, then you got to use Barrage to get rid of it. But you won't have to use Barrage very often because Missiles has a 40% proc rate, so statistically you really should be getting the proc after 3 hits. You do have a whole lot of cooldowns to manage with this spec. Evocation is only a 2-minute cooldown. You'll be using that a lot because this is so mana intensive. You also want to get full use out of your mana gems, which I need to replenish for my tests. So you want to get full use out of your 3 mana gems before the fight's over. And in addition to that, you have Presence of Mind, Arcane Power, and then the normal stuff, Flame Orb and Mirror Image. So you want to definitely get those on hotkeys that you can remember, get them next to each other because it's a lot of cooldowns to manage. Kind of like Frost in that respect, except that Frost was a lot more fun because, I don't know, the mechanics of Frost just seem more fun to me. But anyway, so let's take a look at the spec. The spec is easy. You have lots of free talent points. I mean, you have like a bazillion free talent points because there's really nothing over here to take. Obviously, Master of Elements is excellent, even though you don't crit very often. It's still, you know, anything you can do to save mana is important. And extra crit is also a must-have. The only fire damage you're going to be doing is Flame Orb, and it's not very powerful as an Arcane spec. The main reason you use it is because it procs Arcane Missiles, which is awesome, and it doesn't cost next to nothing. So adding Firepower or Ignite would be a big waste of talent points and offer almost no DPS compared to the utility you'd get out of one of these, like Improved Cone of Cold or even Ice Flows, or even you can even do Shatter. And if you're in an ad situation, things that are freezable. I don't know, you might get something out of that. But I just put all my extra points into the actual tree itself, because there's a lot of great talents in here, like Prismatic Cloak. Matter of fact, this talent is kind of like, this tree is overloaded with useful talents. There's even, I didn't even get Improved Counterspell, which, most people would probably slap me for not getting Improved Counterspell, but I'm not PvPing, I'm just shooting a dummy, so it doesn't matter for the test. But if you do a lot of, random PvP, and you rather just have a spec that can handle both, then you'll probably get this instead of, I don't know, instead of something. Maybe instead of Invocation. This isn't up very often at all. And the other talent that you might want to consider getting is Burning Soul. I didn't worry about it. If I go into a raid and I find myself getting pushback, then I would probably go respec into Burning Soul. But for now, it doesn't really affect the test, so that's fine. And like I said, there's so many talent points you can just move around and just put in here that it's not that important. Prime Glyphs, the Arcane Missile one is obvious, and the Arcane Blast one is obvious because those are your only 2 nukes, really. Those are the only thing you do for damage. Are these 2 spells. And for your last glyph, you have Arcane Barrage as a possibility, but you're going to use this so infrequently that it's only 4% that you're going to see very little return on this glyph. The obvious choice is Molten Armor, and definitely got that. It's a very good glyph, but you're going to be using Molten Armor most of the time, and then you're going to swap to Mage Armor if you get really low, and if your mana cooldowns aren't up yet. The only major glyph worth mentioning is this Arcane Power. It's kind of weird, but it does give you the ability to blink and still cast instant casts while you're blinking, which is pretty nice. And I guess you can use extra mana shield for your Incanter's Absorption. And I don't know about the Mirror Image global cooldown. I don't know. I don't know what's up with that. Maybe someone can help me out with that in the comments. But it is just kind of a weird major glyph, but I guess it's worth using. I mean, it's not like there's any other important major glyphs that it's replacing. Okay, so the rotation, this is where things get complicated. Now, this is probably the thing that most people want to know, and what happened is that in a recent patch, actually yesterday, they changed Arcane Blast so it no longer buffs by, whatever it was, 20%. Now it buffs by 10%, but it also buffs by a very, very tiny amount of haste. I mean, really small amount of haste. And that's, almost inconsequential. My Molten Armor dropped off. I don't know why it does that. After spending some time shooting at a dummy, I've kind of figured that the 2 Arcane Blasts rotation where you just do 2, it doesn't do enough DPS, and the big problem with it is that you have way too much mana through the whole thing, and you should really be spending that mana. So let's go ahead and do 3 blasts, and I'm not using my cooldowns yet, obviously. I'm just showing the most basic rotation. Your cooldowns you want to use are Flame Orb, Mirror Image, Presence of Mind, Arcane Power, and then your mana ones. There, I got 3. Oops. That Arcane Missile proc appeared on my screen late, so I thought I didn't get one. Yeah, it's nice when you get them early. So anyway, you can see from my mana that I am draining mana pretty quickly, but not too fast. I mean, I should be able to switch to a Mage Armor for the last 15 to 20 seconds or so of my Evocation cooldown. So let's just see how much better I do with Mage Armor now. Keeping in mind that I lose DPS, which is always frustrating. That third Arcane Blast costs 6k mana, so let's just do 2 now. I gotta clear casting, so I went ahead to the third one. Why not? Now, assuming I don't get a clear casting. I seem to be fairly mana neutral. Actually, I'm increasing in mana. Well, I'm definitely going to increase now because I got that clear casting. Yeah, so this will definitely more than keep you afloat. As you can see, I'm actually gaining mana very slowly. But the point is, it keeps you going until your evocation's back up, and then you switch back to your 3 stack, which drains your mana again. So that's how the rotation works. 3 stack Arcane Missiles. If you don't get Arcane Missile proc, use Arcane Barrage instead. I think, what did I do? Only 1 Arcane Barrage in that little short rotation. When you get low on mana and you need to save mana, you switch to Mage Armor and just do a 2 rotation. You can also maybe do, well, let's see how much mana I use up on a 2 rotation as with Molten Shields. I only have, what, 14k mana. 2 rotation. Okay, I'm at 10k. Yeah, you still use up mana. So if you use Mage Armor when you're extremely low, like 10k or so, then you pretty much are forced to do a 2 rotation, which causes your DPS to go down. And this number, as you see in Recount now, it's not relevant because I'm not using cooldowns. I'm just trying to demonstrate the Arcane Blast thing. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and mana up and get ready to do the real test. Okay, that's the end of the test. Now, the Recount's lying to you right now because I actually had gotten pulled away from the keyboard for a second, and it caused my damage, my DPS to drop significantly. But it was actually like 6,400 when I had to quit. But basically, I just went until I used up all of my mana gems. I did like 2.5 million, and I was able to keep going using Mage Armor. So 6,400 is the number we're using. Okay, well, how did that break down? Arcane Blast naturally was most of your damage, followed by Arcane Missiles. Basically, every time you use Flame Orb, you get lots of Arcane Missile procs, and that's why it did as well as it did. Arcane Barrage I only had to use a few times to get rid of those stacks. Like I mentioned before when I was talking about the glyphs, you just don't use it that enough for it to be worth anything. Vengeful Wisp, of course, is just the stupid trinket. You can ignore that. And that's it. That's pretty good. Now, as far as the miss rate, yes, my gear is, of course, not hit cap because I'm in 333 dungeon gear, as I do for all of my tests, because it's more relevant, because you are not going to be hit capped when you go into your first boss fight. So, my final thoughts about Arcane Mage. It's very boring. I was really yawning when I was trying to do this rotation. You just mash your Arcane Blast and occasionally hit a cooldown or a proc. It's really slow. I mean, it's not fun at all. And the whole concept of managing your mana as Arcane is really kind of lost. Look at the mastery here, which has apparently been nerfed. I thought it was 20%, but it increases the amount of spell damage based on how much mana you haven't spent. So keeping your mana higher is supposed to give you more damage, but you aren't really given tools to manage your mana. You can put on Mage Armor, and you can use a conserve mana spec rotation where you do less DPS. But in the end, the bonus for Mana Adept does not make up for the DPS loss from using a weaker rotation. So what can we do to fix Arcane? Well, it needs an overhaul. It's pretty screwed up. It should really just go back to the way it was. Now, I also want to mention that in higher gear, you should be able to go longer between evocates, which means you should have to use the Mage Armor technique less often. That's going to help your DPS a lot. Like on live, where gear is just totally out of control, people are just spamming 4 stacks of Arcane Blast for a while, and they're able to do that for like 20 or 30 seconds. So it's obviously that'll show you, what's going to be like at extremely high amounts of gear stacking. But hopefully in Cataclysm, they're going to finally do what they've been saying they've been trying to do for years, and eliminate overscaling of gear. So at least at the bottom level of gear, which is what I'm at now, you can't quite make it to your next evocate unless you use the Mage Armor technique. I also want to add one little caveat to the end of this video, just so you know that Arcane was just recently changed, and they may change it again. I don't know why they would change Arcane Blast and make it worse and hurt DPS for Arcane Mages. I don't know why they're doing that, because obviously it's behind other specs by far. I wouldn't even consider Arcane right now for rating, not at all. So hopefully they buff it soon, and if they do, in the future after I finish this series, which is almost done, I plan on doing follow-ups for any class that has been changed significantly since I did the video. Hunters are going to need a new video, and hopefully Rogues soon if they ever get around to buffing them, and Arcane Mages if they fix them too. Well, that's it for the Arcane Mage for today. This is Crowmar with TGN, thanking you for watching, and as always, please rate, please comment, and please subscribe.